Alright, so today I want to give you a different perspective on dark genes in ball pythons. And essentially what a dark gene is, it's a gene that darkens the background of the snake. And a lot of times when you work a dark gene in with other combinations of genes, it'll give an overall darkening effect as far as the visual appearance. And when most people think of dark genes, they're thinking of the classic dark genes in ball pythons. There's just a handful of them. But what I've actually found this year is there's other genes besides what you would consider to be one of your traditional dark genes that actually give a darkening effect. And it's kind of interesting, you look at a lot of genes and there's a lot of variability from one version of the gene to another, and sometimes the dark version of those genes can have a really strong darkening effect as far as mixing it in with other combinations. As a matter of fact, this year I actually have a pastel calico female that I bred, and I actually isolated the version of the calico. And at first when I produced it, I was like, what in the world is this? It was a really dark orange snake. I could not figure out what it was. Come to find out, it's just a dark version of the calico that acts as a dark morph, which is kind of interesting. You wouldn't think that calico would actually be considered one of your dark genes in ball pythons. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over the internet and I want to show you some of the classical dark genes in ball pythons and show you some of the other genes that you might not consider dark genes in ball pythons. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here and start with a list of some of your more common dark genes in ball pythons. Most people, when they're talking about dark genes, they're talking about one of the genes on this list, and I actually put cinnamon and black pastel on the top of the list, probably two of the most common dark genes in all of ball pythons. As a matter of fact, the cinnamon is allelic with black pastel, so you can actually take a cinnamon, you breed it with a black pastel, and if you actually get the cinnamon black pastel, it's known as an 8-ball. It's a completely black and patternless snake. Pretty awesome. And the cinnamon and black pastel can be really variable. Some of them are really dark and some of them are kind of browned out. It's interesting. I'd say they're probably two of the most variable genes in all ball pythons. There's also the leopard. The leopard's another dark gene and probably one of my favorites. The leopard can really scramble up the patterns, especially when you work it in with other pattern enhancing genes like the spot nose or the enchi or the pastel. You can make some really impressive combos, really impressive dark combos, because leopard is a dark gene. And blackhead is also on the list. Blackhead is considered to be the darkest of the dark. Blackhead, sometimes it can actually overwhelm the visual appearance because it can be really dark. The mahogany is also on the list, not very common. The mahogany is a really cool gene. It actually darkens it, and it also, in a lot of cases, it'll actually give it kind of a coppery sheen to the combination. Pretty awesome. The DJI is also on the list. It's a dark gene. It stands for gotta have it. Pretty awesome. It really jumbles up the pattern as well as darkens it. And then the confusion slash acid slash static is, these are actually some of the newer genes on the market. They've been around for a few years. We're just starting to, explore exactly, the potential of these three genes and if they're the same or if they're different lines of the same thing. And essentially what this is, it's kind of like leopard on steroids. It really explodes the pattern and really darkens it as well. There's also the black axanthic. It's actually a recessive gene that's, it's actually considered to be another line of axanthic that is really super dark. Not that popular, the black axanthic. And then there's also the chocolate, which is another dark gene. So these are some of the more popular dark genes. And I want to jump over here on Morphmarket.com and I want to show you some of the variability in some of these dark genes that can kind of confuse people when you're looking at different combinations. And the first one I want to start with is the cinnamon. The cinnamon can be extremely variable from one version of the cinnamon to another. And essentially, a lot of times it can look almost like a normal as far as the visual appearance, kind of like a dark normal. But if you actually took two cinnamons and you breed them together, you actually get the super cinnamon. And take a look at this crazy snake. This is a really super dark, super cinnamon. As a matter of fact, the super black pastel is almost a little bit blacker than this in some cases, and they can be really variable. So this is one version of the super cinnamon, and take a look at this. This is another version of the super cinnamon. The same exact gene, two copies of the cinnamon. One is super dark and one is super light. And it gets a little bit confusing because you can actually look at super cinnamon combinations or some of these dark gene combinations, and you look at the differences between them, and you're thinking, all right, those are just variabilities in my dark gene, where it's actually could be, you know, variations from other genes mixed in with your dark genes to actually give the darkening effect, which is pretty awesome. So take a look at this. This is actually the sugar, and the sugar is essentially the same thing as the calico. And when I actually bred my snake this year, and I produced I actually produced some calicos, I thought for sure they were actually going to look like this, with some white coming up the side and pretty much the same color as a normal. A lot of times the sugars / calicos can look, you know, pretty much a normal color. A lot of times the sugar calico can actually kind of wipe out the sides. And you know, I haven't actually done a comparison video of the sugars compared to the calicos directly, but pretty much from what I'm seeing, I'm convinced that the sugar is pretty much the same thing as the calico. They're pretty much interchangeable. So actually, when I actually produced this year, take a look at this. I actually produced a calico that looked exactly like this. So when I first produced this, I was like, what in the world did I just produce? It's a really dark, super dark snake, and it has a lot of orange to it. They look almost exactly like this. There's actually two of them over here, and I couldn't find any calicos that looked like this. They actually had one version of the sugar that looked just like mine. And it's kind of interesting because a lot of times on these sugars and calicos, a lot of times you don't really see a lot of the white coming up the sides. A lot of times you'll just see some streaked out sides. But I actually took my version of calico, bred it into a bamboo, and I actually do get a really high white version of the gene. So it definitely is that version of calico. When I first produced this, I was kind of scratching my head trying to figure out what it is. And take a look at this. You can actually take this version of the calico and work it into other genes to get a darkening effect. It acts as a dark gene, which is pretty amazing. So take a look at this. This is actually the combination of the blackhead with the calico. So the blackhead is a really dark gene, and when you mix it in with this version of the calico, you can see it really doesn't change the color that much, but you can definitely see the calico is in there. And usually when I think of calico, I think of a lot of white coming up on the sides, and you can see in this particular version, it doesn't really bring the white up, but it really kind of streaks out the sides on the calico version of the blackhead. So take a look at this. I actually pulled up another blackhead calico, and this one you can definitely see the orange coming through in the blackhead calico. And I'm thinking this is probably similar to my version of the calico with the kind of the darker reddish, the kind of the orange color to it. As a matter of fact, I actually produced a calico pinstripe, and it was like a really dark orange pinstripe, really crazy looking, and it didn't have any white coming up the sides. I made some really crazy combinations with my dark version of calico. It was pretty amazing. So take a look at this. A lot of people, when they think of pastel, they think of a really bright snake, bright and flashy. And a lot of times I've actually seen people, they make some pastels. It's like, this is a really high quality pastel because it's super bright and flashy. But take a look at this. You can also make pastels that have an orange color to them. I actually produced one this year that kind of had like a rusty orange color to it, or like a rusty brown color, almost like a dark gene. It was pretty amazing. As a matter of fact, I actually have two different lines of pastels in my collection. Sometimes when I make a pastel combination, it's really bright and flashy, and sometimes it acts as a dark gene. And it's kind of interesting when people start talking about pastels. A lot of people think, you know, I made a pastel, it's not really that bright, it must be a low quality pastel. And come to find out, you can actually take this version of pastel, work it in with other dark genes, and make some really impressive combinations where you want to darken the appearance but use the effects of the pastel to really jumble up the pattern. So take a look at this. I actually pulled this up. This is actually the blackhead with the pastel, and you know, after a while you kind of look at these snakes and you think, all right, I know what version of pastel is in here. There is a really bright version of pastel in this blackhead because you can really tell it's breaking through and it really bringing a lot of bright yellow out of this. Kind of an interesting combination. I actually pulled up this other one over here, the same exact thing with a pastel blackhead, and look at how much orange it actually brought into this combination. Pretty amazing. So really it depends on which version of pastel that you actually have and what you're shooting for as far as the final visual appearance of your combinations. All right, so here's the last one I wanted to show you, and that is the lesser. The lesser can be really variable as well. As a matter of fact, there's quite a few other genes that can be really variable. Anything that has a dark version and a light version, you can actually go after the dark version and consider it in some cases to be kind of a pseudo dark morph and work it into some of your darker combinations. And there's other genes that I'd say pretty much don't have a dark version. There is the pinstripe. I haven't really seen that much variability in the pinstripe. They're all pretty much like a bright gold snake. There's also the spider that's not really variable. So it really depends on which genes you're shooting for. I know the bamboo, like the bamboo around my neck, Bobby, that I show at the beginning and the end of the video, I've actually seen some pretty dark bamboos, and I'd say Bobby is probably one of the brightest ones that I've ever seen. So there's a lot of different genes as far as, you know, kind of what you can go after as far as the dark version, but you really can't go after dark versions of all the genes. So when it comes to the lesser, most people think of the lesser as a really bright and flashy gene. As a matter of fact, when I introduce the lesser in a lot of my videos, I'm like, all right, this is a really bright, flashy snake, but it can be really variable. You can actually get some pretty dark lessers. So if you actually take a look at this one, especially looking at the background right along the ridge, you can see the background is pretty white. It's like a kind of a tan color between the colors of the yellow here. And I actually pulled up a really dark version of the lesser. Take a look at this one and look at the back on it, how dark it is, almost like an inkjet black version of the lesser. I'd say usually it doesn't go all the way down. Sometimes it'll go about halfway down, but sometimes the lessers can be really variable from one to the other. And I actually pulled up a leopard over here, and I wanted to show you the difference between the light version and the dark version of the lesser worked into the leopard. And this is what this is one version of the leopard. This is probably one of the craziest leopards that I've ever seen. And sometimes they can have a really crazy pattern, and sometimes they can be almost like normal looking patterns on the leopards, maybe just a little bit jumbled up. But usually the leopards have a really dark, almost like an inkjet black background on some of your really dark leopards. So here's what happens if you take leopard and you work it into the lighter version of the lesser. Take a look at this. You get a really light looking snake. It's pretty interesting. And once you start looking into these genes and you look at the combinations, you can pick them out pretty easy. You can say, yep, that is the lesser leopard. That is the bright version of the lesser worked in with the leopard. You can tell the lesser almost completely dominates the black background of the leopard, which is pretty amazing. I actually pulled up one last snake over here, and that is the dark version of the lesser with the leopard. And take a look at this. This is pretty amazing. The same exact genes, the leopard and the lesser. And in this case, the lesser almost works as a dark gene, working it in with the leopard. Pretty amazing. Even darker than some of the darkest leopards. So you can see in a lot of these genes, there's light versions and dark versions, and sometimes you can consider the dark versions kind of like a pseudo dark gene. All right, so it is time for the question of the day. And Rolando Tolentino asks, can ball pythons eat each other? And that is a very good question. So there's certain species of snakes that actually eat other snakes, and you have to be really careful when you put them together. And those include king cobras. I've actually seen king cobras eat ball pythons, which is kind of crazy. I've actually seen king snakes eating other snakes. A lot of people say if you're breeding king snakes, you really don't want to put a big one with a small one to breed, because you run the risk of the bigger king snake actually eating the small one, which could be problematic. Well, with the ball pythons, I'd say they're really not known for eating other snakes. Ball pythons pretty much only eat rodents, although I'd probably caution against having a big ball python in the same enclosure with a hatchling ball python. You could have some problems there. But essentially, ball pythons are solitary creatures, so you really don't want to house them together in the first place. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.